Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Good Chats. I'm your host, Jenny Landon, and we're here to uncover the secrets to living a life you love. But before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, especially Kowalski's in Shoreview and Doug Deseret Construction. I also want to thank Evereve and Roseville for providing my clothes. They always know how to push me out of my comfort zone and ensure I look my very best for every episode. Lastly, I want to thank my amazing team here at CTV who always make it fun while keeping me on track. Today we have a really exciting show because we have one of my favorite people here from Boston, Massachusetts. I'd like to introduce you to Craig A. Miller. Craig, hi. Thanks for flying in.
Yeah.
Sorry I couldn't get you better weather.
No, it's good. I love it. I like the cold.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, before we even get into anything else, let's talk about the cold and what it is that you like to do in the cold, because I think you're maybe a little out there for...
No, I love it. I have a real good friend of mine, and we go out in the middle, usually the colder the better, or the less inhabited the better, and we'll just pack up a sled or a backpack and just walk out into the woods for several days. And yeah, we go out like negative 17 and all that.
But this isn't just like a backpack. Like I've seen pictures and you've told me. So how much weight this last trip you went on?
So the last time we each pulled pulk sleds, which is like basically a sled that you pull from your hips, and we each had definitely at least 100 pounds each. Yeah. Wow. So, but there's a lot of stuff you need in negative 17-degree weather.
Yeah.
To have a good time, but it's I love it because I think what I like most about it is that it truly doesn't remind me of anything I've done in life. It doesn't tie to anything. There's no memory attached to it. There's no influence or anything that brought me there. It's just so different and so blank. Mm-hmm. It's like a blank canvas in that sense, and just being in that kind of a space where you literally have nothing around you that's reminding you of anything or making you think of anything, you can really set yourself free. That's why I love it so much.
Yeah.
And it's unusual, and I'm kind of into that stuff.
Yeah, you kind of do your own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know, which is why I was drawn to you. So before we get into who you are, I want to actually tell everyone how I met Craig. So Craig and I were both speaking at a conference in Michigan in November of 2018, and I had an afternoon breakout session that I was going to do and was walking back to the hotel part of the conference center just to go review my talk. And there's this really beautiful hallway that connects the hotel from the conference center. And I had just turned the corner of this hallway when I see this guy, like all in black, like dark hoodie and this backpack. And I honestly thought that he was like a military vet and maybe had some PTSD. But my immediate feeling was, I know him. I know him, I'm supposed to know him, and I love him. Like that was it, and I knew it. And we were walking towards each other, and as we got closer, I said, "Hi, how are you?" And I scared him, and he kind of startled.
Yeah, well, I'm easily frightened.
Yes, I picked up on this. So we just kind of passed each other, and I knew that I really wanted to talk to you, but I also knew that I really needed to go practice my talk. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again, but there was this part of me that just knew that I knew you. And so after I finished practicing my talk, I went back down to a friend of mine who runs the book sales at the conference. And I walked up to her and she said, "Jenny, you have to meet this guy." And I was like, "Okay, what guy?" And she goes, "The author of this book. This is how it feels. You have to meet Craig Miller." And I said, "Okay, well, where is he?" And it's like the room just like parted. All the people moved, and she pointed right to you, and you looked over at us right as it happened. And I was like, "Okay, got it." And so I walk straight over, and Craig is like deer in the headlights.
Yeah, why are these two people pointing at me, and why is one now coming over? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so I walked up to you and I said, "Hi, I'm Jenny Landon, and I was told that I have to know you. So what's your story?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's your story?
Well, I think it starts fairly early. I to put it like to clean it up and just put it right out there. In the mental health community, I'm not only an advocate, but I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and struggled for a long time with mental health issues, depression, thoughts of suicide were always with me, obsessive compulsive disorder, and things like that. But I think the first time I considered suicide, I was 8 years old, and that was really kind of course, there was mental health issues associated with that, but I also feel, looking back on it now, that it was a lot to do with my environment. I lived in a tradition, unfortunately, a very typical type of American household with divorced parents and alcoholism and things like that, and a stepfather that I did not get along with at all. But what made it really hard for me was I was being sexually abused by a guy in our neighborhood. And what makes it even further is the majority of the instances that happened in a crawl space beneath my house. So it was very disturbing stuff. And I couldn't tell anybody about it, and I think, I talk about this a lot in my talks. Like, people ask, like, why didn't you tell anybody? Why couldn't you? And to me, it comes down to trust. I didn't have anybody around me that I trusted in. And I want to kind of get into what I mean by that. It's not so much that I didn't trust what they would do with this secret or my story. It was more like I didn't trust in how they would react to the situation. My father lived on the other side of the city that I grew up in, and he has severe anger issues, Marine, veteran, Vietnam War stuff. And if I had gone to him and said, "Dad, this guy's doing this to me," that likely would have been front page news, and I didn't want that at all. I just wanted it to end. So there was, as a child, I talk about this a lot in my talks too, of why I didn't feel safe enough to tell anybody, and that's really what it comes down to. It's that I didn't trust people to react in the way that I wanted them to react, which was just make it stop, not police and front page news kind of stuff, and I'm sure that's what would have happened. So that was a huge factor in my depression, and what I know now was the starting signs of obsessive compulsive disorder. So I would walk to school, and I had this thought, like, I have to walk right in the middle of the sidewalk. If I am not centered to the left or right, then something bad was going to happen. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's just going to happen, and it's going to be my fault, and I have to walk centered. And I would take every step so intentional and so careful. And then get to school, and I'd sit in my classroom, and I'd stand the book up on edge and let it fall open, and whatever page it landed on, the first word I had to look at would be the predictor of what kind of day it was. And if it was a meaningless word like and or the, then it would always be bad. It was always skewed on the negative. And I knew, I'm like 7, 8 years old. I know this doesn't make sense. I know it's irrational, but there was very little I could do about it. I couldn't talk myself out of it. And then the first thing that would happen that day that was bad, it was immediately attributed to the fact that I didn't walk right. It was my fault. I did this. And I didn't have any way of coping with this or managing it or anything. So not only did I not trust in my family that I was living with, or the people in my neighborhood who were hurting me, and my peers who were bullying me for being molested, it was like, to break that off for a second, it was like everyone who I wished knew about it didn't know, and the people I wished didn't know did, and it was all the other kids in the neighborhood that he had tried this with and stuff. So rather than telling the right people or it being fixed, it was used against me, like, pretty badly. Mm-hmm. So I didn't trust my family or anything, but I also didn't trust in my own mind, and that was incredibly difficult. And I had this outlook at 8 years old that, you know what, if this is what life is, then I just don't want anything to do with it. And I wasn't distraught. I wasn't emotionally charged. I wasn't it wasn't this act of desperation. I think that's what was so, if I look back on it, what was so scary is that it was a very clean, matter-of-fact type decision. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna go. And that's the way I've considered and managed suicide through pretty much my whole life. Is it's not this typical, what you traditionally associate with someone being suicidal, where it's this desperate act and they're in the heat of the moment sort of thing. This is long, this is thought out, this is an option, you know. And then we moved away from that city when I was about 12 or 13 years old, around 13. And not the molestation and the bullying and stuff never stopped. So it didn't ease up. The only thing that prevented it was we literally moved away. And I never told anybody about it.
Not until your book came out.
Yeah, my
right?
family, my whole family. So I wrote the book about 6 years ago. And no one in my family knew, not only did they not know of the sexual abuse issues, but they didn't know the extent that I was bullied and what it really felt like to live in the house that I did. I have 2 older brothers, but they're 7 and 9 years older than me. So they were out long before I was. And, you know, they have their own story too. But they weren't there for what I did, what I was living and I was experiencing. So I had no one to turn, literally no one. And then when I moved to this new town that we moved out of, to me it was like this opportunity where, okay, I'm going to start over. I'm going to move here and I'm going to change who I am, and no one is going to know that I'm the person to abuse and I'm the person to victimize and I'm the one to make fun of. They're not going to know that. And I approached it from that side with the confidence that this is how I'm going to change my life, and it worked temporarily, but it worked. And the guys thought I was cool and the girls thought I was cute. I'm like, what is this? It was like fantasy land. And then this to me at the time, the prettiest girl in the whole town. It was a small town, but she was the prettiest one. She asked me out, and I'm like, wow, like I never experienced that in my life. And eventually, because I had not done anything to manage or cope or deal with the trauma that I experienced as a child and these thoughts of OCD that were still continuing and thoughts of suicide that I was just hiding, it started to really come through, and she broke up with me. And I think that was I can honestly say there was nothing ever that happened in my life that was a pivotal moment. Like, it wasn't like that changed everything. It was more of a process. And when she left me as a kid, that was absolutely devastating.
Well, because she's the first person
Yeah.
who showed an interest, like a genuine interest in you.
So you can look back on it, and what's unfortunate is the people around me at that time, they're looking at me as like a 15-year-old kid. Parents, friends, teachers, everybody, and being like, what is wrong with you? You'll find another girl. Like, I get she's your first girlfriend and your first love, but what people didn't realize, and honestly I didn't realize at the time either, was it really had nothing to do with her. And I think that's true in a lot of cases through what we experience in life. It's not necessarily the people or the circumstances or the environment that paints the picture of the scenario you're in. It's about what you feel and what you take from that. And when I look back at it now, I'm like, you know, it wasn't her. She wasn't that special. It was the fact that this, for me, what she represented was the first time in life that I was like, maybe it will get better. Maybe it will be okay. And maybe it's worth it to stay here. And I'll give life a chance. And then when she left and my heart broke, it was not her that I missed or her that hurt me. It was life saying, no, it's not going to get better. No, it is going to hurt. And you should have never let your guard down. And that's how I saw it. So it really, really hit me very hard. And then the symptoms of OCD and the stress and everything, depression, anxiety, gets so much worse. And it got really, really bad. And I had a suicide attempt at 15, and I was hospitalized. And then throughout my teens, mental health and convincing myself not to attempt suicide was the biggest priority of mine ever. Like, I didn't care about anything around me. And I look back and people were like, you know, my parents or even school were like, they made it somewhat easier for me. They took some of the pressure away, but they were also like,
how so?
well, I didn't have as much responsibility or accountability to specific assignments and staying in class. I actually had a guidance counselor who knew me well and knew that, I mean, during high school I was hospitalized 5 times for mental health issues, suicide attempts, and things like that. So, and this is a public school that wasn't the best school system to begin with, but I had a guidance counselor who wrote me a permanent pass to leave class whenever I needed to, and the teachers were all well aware and stuff. So there were times when I would just feel overwhelmed and I would just leave school. I'd just get up and go. And I never took advantage of that. It was just, that's how it was. So it got really, really difficult for that. And even at that, people in that time were like, you know, you gotta put something into school. What are you gonna do when you get out? And you're gonna need this stuff. And like, no one really understood that making myself the biggest priority in my life was the most important thing I could have done. And that's what I tell people now when I speak about suicide, who are feeling suicidal and struggling with it, is that you have to make yourself the #1 priority. Not your job, not your career, not your family, your friends, the people you love. I get that. Now, if that's what's keeping you alive, fair enough, stick with it. But if you need to get out of the situation you're in and you need to relieve yourself of these suicidal thoughts and move on and manage them and own them and iron them out, you have to make yourself the biggest priority. You have to. And one of the things I had to realize was that it doesn't matter about my friends and my grades and everything else, because if I don't fix this first part, I won't be here for anyone or anything. And I knew that. So
no, and I read your book. I mean, so we met, and my daughter read it first, Kaylee, who was turning 15 right around the time I met you. And it really resonated with you because she'd been struggling. And I know after reading your book, it really shifted things for me, that she would call me or text me from school and say, I can't be here. I can't breathe. I can't handle this. This is too much. And I would go pick her up. I mean, it was like no question, right? It was like when I would get those messages. Now, if I got a message from her that just said, I'm having a hard time, then I would push a little bit and say, do you think you can just hang in there another hour, right? Can you do that? But when she would send me the messages saying that she couldn't breathe, then I would go pick her up. And my life was complete, just nonsense at that point, because I couldn't plan anything, because I knew at any given moment I would need to go be there for her. And I remember her school, which is a very flexible environment. At a certain point, they're like, she has this many absences and she needs to be here, and it's like, she needs to be alive. And she needs to know that I have her back and that I will be there for her no matter what. Do I love that she's missing school? No. Do I want her better? Yes. But for right now, what she needs more than anything is to know I'm there for her. But a lot of that was from you, from reading that from you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's key. And it's funny, I kind of smirked when you were talking about her school, saying that she wasn't there, because that same guidance counselor my senior year sat me down, and he's like, Craig, I can't pass you if you're not here.
Yeah.
You have to come. And to take it even further, I had left my house when I was about 16 years old, so I wasn't accountable to anybody really. And that, for me, I don't speak about that like as a positive thing, moving out, because it's not. It made things very, very difficult for me. I felt at the time that it was safer and better for me to be out of my house than it would be to be in the house. Just the environment that it was in and the way it was affecting me. What's unfortunate, and what probably wasn't the best decision, is I moved in to a friend's garage that was like this kind of a barn garage type thing, offset from his house, all dilapidated, falling apart. And we were playing music at the time, and music was our life. And I lived in this kid's garage for years, And you
said the parents?
His parents didn't know, like they knew I was there, right? So they knew Craig was,
around
they knew I was going
lot.
through things. They were very, very, very supportive. I remember often my friend's mom would make him lunch, even in high school, and she would send him to school with 2 lunches, so she knew. And then there was one year, I had nothing. I was literally living in their garage. When they discovered, like really understood what was going on, they brought me in the house, But I remember one year his parents got me like socks and underwear for Christmas. I was probably like 17 years old, you know. So I think they clearly knew, and they were so helpful to me. But they, like I would wash my clothes and take a shower when they were at work. I'd stay home from school and do that stuff and then leave. Yeah. They kind of knew like Craig wasn't going home very often. And then it finally turned a corner where I believe my mother called his mother and had some conversation where like, are you okay that he's there that much? And his parents ended up just bringing me in the house and stuff.
So I know from getting to know you over the last year that you are not one to just tell your story and be like, here's all the difficult stuff I went through. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell people what changed and how did you get to where you are today, because you have a great life today.
Yeah, things are very different.
Yeah. So what changed for you?
I
guess let me ask you that. What did you learn?
Yeah, what did I? Yeah,
What did you
I don't know
learn?
if there's enough time.
No,
30 minute
we've got
show,
like
but-
4 minutes left.
Okay,
No.
so to go back on it a little, where I said that my experiences mean everything to me, and there's opportunity to learn and extrapolate what we need from that. That's something that always kept me going. And the thing that, beyond that, the deeper level that really kept me alive, truly kept me alive. I mean, suicide was an option every single day, every day, every night. In fact, I used it in a way to actually help me get to the next day as an option, which sounds fairly dangerous, but I knew myself and I knew my place, and it worked for me. But I would say, you know what, I'll give tomorrow a try, and if tomorrow doesn't work, I know I have a way out. And that helped, and I kept being tomorrow, and kept coaxing me through it, like asking your daughter to spend another hour at
just one
school,
more,
right? It was
yeah.
that kind of thing I was doing to myself. But I had, beyond that, I had this innate feeling, and I don't know where it came from. I've thought about it forever. I've meditated on it. I get asked very frequently, how did I develop this idea that life was valuable and worth living? And that just always was with me. It was innate. I just felt as a little kid, just hang on, it'll be okay. You'll learn from this. It'll make sense someday, somehow. And that was significant to me. I used to write notes to myself all the time as 7, 8 years old, where I would remind myself as an adult, don't forget how this feels right now. Remember where you are and how it feels when people say these things or do these things. And like that always meant something to me. So when I was 20 years old, I made a very significant attempt to end my life. And I was in the hospital, in the ICU, intensive care unit, for 3 days. And you ask like what changed, and kind of going back on it a bit too, is there was no one moment that changed. It was more of a process. In fact, it still is. But there are key moments that definitely helped drive that forward. One of the things that I think was most important to me was at the end of that 3 days in the ICU, I'm laying there and my brother is sitting next to me. And my brother's like this older, he's 9 years older, very professional. At the time, I'm not. So our communication is different. And he thinks like with the other side of his brain, I'm all art and emotion and, go off of my feeling and heart. And he's just logic, and it has to make sense, and very business savvy, and can make really difficult decisions very easily. So we're completely different. And that makes our communication even harder. So I'm laying in this bed. It's actually in the evening, and I was about to be discharged to a mental health hospital. And he's sitting next to me, the lights are dim, and he's got his tie on and his monogrammed cuffs and everything. And he's thinking, and we're not saying anything. It's really uncomfortable. And finally he leans in and he says, Craig, what's gonna make you wanna stay? It gets me. I say this in my talks hundreds of times. It makes me emotional every single time. And that's really because I remember that so well. I remember that question so well. And what hit me so hard from it was that I didn't have an answer. That was like mind expanding to me, like this revelation. I don't know what would make me want to stay. And like, what a deep, penetrating feeling. I could have given you 1,000 reasons of why I wanted to die, but not one of why I wanted to live.
And you've talked about that before, that people often will focus on why do you want to die?
Right.
Like, why are you in this place? And you and I've talked about that. Like, for me as a crisis counselor, I would always focus on something that they loved.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how am I going to keep them here?
Exactly.
You know, and that was 20 years ago when I started doing that as a crisis counselor. But you were saying that that question really was never asked of you.
It was never asked of me. And even today, in up until recently, I believe it's starting to be more significant, but people didn't ask that question often. A lot of times it's just what you're trained in suicide prevention is to ask someone if they want to die. You need to get that answer. Are they in crisis? Right. Do they want to die, or do you want to die? And I've been asked that question hundreds of times from doctors and emergency rooms and, you know, first responders, everything, of all the stuff I've gone through. But I was never asked, do you want to live? And that to me is such a critical question, because this is why I believe so much in that question versus do you want to die. For me, as someone who struggled with suicide my entire life, if you know, being here is suicide, I'm going to make that decision. I'm in crisis, I'm in danger. Saying no, I don't want to die, that answer had always satisfied everyone around me, the doctors, the teachers, the guidance counselors, my parents, me, even me. Saying no, I don't want to die must mean I'm okay. But just because I don't want to die doesn't mean I'm safe or I'm happy or I'm well. It might only mean I'm just 1 inch above that bottom. I don't want to die. It doesn't mean I'm good. But the perception that, oh, if I don't want to die, I'm okay, became a reality. Like, this is the standard of living. I must be okay. I must be fine. And that's not true. But if you ask someone, do you want to live? And I really think about it, like, live, yes. If you say yes to I want to live, that's not 1 inch above the bottom, and that's up at the sky. That's a whole new way of approaching things and different perception. And yeah, I want to take smart risks, and I want to know what it's like to love and feel strong emotions and make myself vulnerable and do things and try to go after my goals and fail sometimes, and that's okay, and I want to learn from it. Like, that's saying yes, I want to live. No, I don't want to die, to me is somewhat meaningless. You know, it's very shallow, and to me it's a dangerous question.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more question for you. And then we have to wrap up, which everyone, this is just part 1 of 2 episodes, because there's no way we could fit it all into one. But my question for you is, what does it mean to you to live a life you love?
I personally have to know that I am doing everything I can to be the best person I can be. I have this belief deep within me that I'm going to get to the end of my life someday, and it might be my last breath, and I will probably know that, I hope. And I want to know that I took every opportunity to live as much as I could, even if it hurt, even if it was hard. And I took every opportunity as something I'm grateful for, and an opportunity to become a better part of who I am. And sometimes that's really difficult to go into, you know, challenge myself and take myself out. The fact is, it's easy for me to just dive into anything head first, because I have nothing left to be afraid of. There's nothing left for me to be afraid of. I wanted to die. It doesn't get worse than that.
Yeah.
It really doesn't get worse than that. That's it. That's the bottom. I've been at the bottom, and I found my way out, and I can do it again. So.
Oh, I love you. Thank you for coming in and doing this with me. So we're going on that note, I love you. So, okay. We're coming to a close, and we'll be back in our next episode. Craig will join us again. And but as some of you know, we have started a new tradition at Good Chats, where we close the show by dedicating each episode to an individual who continuously strives to live a life they love, and oftentimes they help others do the same. Now, I want to say that if you know someone who you'd like to nominate to receive this dedication, please email us at goodchats@growingoutofdarkness.org. You can visit our website to learn more about it at growingoutofdarkness.org. Today, I have a special dedication. We are dedicating today's episode to John Grovestein in Boston, Massachusetts. John is being recognized for his dedication and commitment to his friends, family, and work. He's known for thinking outside of the box and accomplishing any task he sets his mind to. John, I want to thank you for being who you are and for sharing your love of life with all of those around you. For anyone who's been watching, and if you have questions for Craig, or you want to be in touch with us and learn more about what you can do to live a life you love, please visit our website at growingoutofdarkness.org. You can email Craig even at craig@growingoutofdarkness.org with any questions you might have for him. And we will get those answered and right back out to you. So thank you for joining us. And until next time, be good to yourselves and to others.